President Trump today at this press conference he had um, uh, talked about Ukraine, and he said one thing which I'm going to play for you now, which is a little upsetting to some people. He basically seemed to be blaming Ukraine for the Ukraine-Russia war, and they're nothing good about that. Sam, please play number one.
I want to see peace. Look, you know why I want? Because I don't want all these people killed anymore. I'm looking at people that are being killed, and they're Russian and Ukrainian people, but they're people. Doesn't matter where they're from on the whole planet. And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad for this. He was so bad, so pathetic, so sad. But with all of that being said, look, it is what it is. When I left, there was no chance that this could have happened. But it happened because we had incompetent leadership at many different levels. But when you see what's taking place in Ukraine with millions of people killed, including the soldiers, millions of people killed, a big percentage of their cities knocked down to the ground. I don't know how anybody even lives there. You know, when they say they took a poll and Zelensky's at 4%, who's living there? You know, I mean, it's hard to believe that people live there. Their cities are being knocked down. And this is something that would have never happened. And by the way, for 4 years, it didn't happen. It was never going to happen. Go ahead.
All right, so Ryan laughed, and the funny part was funny because it's the kind of thing he says that makes people like me and Ryan laugh. But Ryan, am I wrong? Did he appear to be blaming Zelensky for the war?
I mean, he's constantly been harsh on Zelensky, and Zelensky has been a bit of a punching bag throughout the entire campaign. He's not wrong on the merits, though, of the population decline in Ukraine. It begs the question to
Forget
defenders.
that part. Forget that part. Just
Okay.
he seems to be saying Zelensky should have ended the war sooner. It's his fault, and this is just is constant veering towards Putin that troubles a lot of people.
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
no.
I understand why it troubles people. Obviously, Ukraine wasn't responsible for the war. There were a lot of mistakes made by the West, I think, for the last 30 years that predates Trump, predates Zelensky, going back to the end of the Soviet Union. But I don't know if he's done this a lot. I mean, this is not the
Yeah, he
first time he's
has.
blamed
He
Zelensky.
has. He has. I'll say this. I think that if the war is ended on whatever terms, as long as the territory established for Ukraine is protected, as long as that happens, then I think the history of Biden and Zelensky and how they interacted is going to warrant a lot of scrutiny because they did mobilize to protect Ukraine and kept Russia from taking over Kyiv, but they didn't have a system. They didn't execute a plan that ended the war or that pushed the Russians out. Right? I mean,
They had
they
no
did
win.
something.
There was no avenue
There
for
was
them to
no way.
win.
There's
There
no
was
avenue for
no way Ukraine was going to win.
because
Demographically, there was no way
yes,
Ukraine's going to win.
correct, my joke, but it was true for the whole war was Zelensky was willing to make a deal on only under except under two circumstances. When the war was going poorly, he didn't want to make a deal because he was losing and he knew the deal would be on poor terms, and he didn't want to make a deal when the war was going well for him because things were going well. Why would he want to make a deal? Right?
Right.
So the Biden administration got funds, built the coalition. They did some things that I think are positive. But in the end, there was no end game strategy to end this thing, let alone win it. And the
Well,
President Trump right about that.
they proved that Russia is not a global power. It's barely a regional power. That the Russian army is not what people think it is. It's not the Soviet Union army at all. They
Yeah.
couldn't even take Kiev. So that was positive. There's a lot of technological advances with drone war now that we've sit there and seen in a real way in first world countries. I think that the ultimate question is, what is the point of Ukrainian borders if there's no Ukrainian people? And there will not
Yeah.
be Ukrainian people in 30, 40, 50 years at the rate this war is going. There just won't be.
Yeah.